Imagine you're face to face with God. Doesn't matter if you're religious or not, put the belief system aside for a moment. Faced with the omnipotent presence of a figure so ingrained in mythos and lore, how would you react? Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about Arknights Endfield's 1.0 story, but we're doing it mostly spoiler free, and I think my take may be just a bit different from your normal YouTubers, so just hear me out and try to stick with me. This is going to get into some weird territory. Let's get into it. Before I dive too deep into things, I do want to be clear that this video isn't intended as a defense of the story we were given in 1.0. I think the Valley 4 story was fine in terms of introducing concepts and environments, but it really did leave a lot to be desired. Firstly, there were way too many tutorials, and I get it, there's a lot of aspects to the game that they want you to learn, but the sheer amount of tutorials is downright intimidating. Not only that, but the story itself is just sort of milquetoast. There are hints of really good writing here and there, but it's mostly smothered out by the other moments. It's not that it was necessarily bad per se, but more so that it wasn't particularly good either. But let me pose a hypothetical here. Maybe the story on its surface level isn't intended to be anything fantastic. Maybe it's a setup for something more. A lot of you are likely thinking, duh, look at literally every other gacha game out there, and you would be correct. There are a litany of 1.0 games out there with far superior chapters coming post-launch. Actually, practically every gacha game has that situation. But what if I told you it wasn't just that, but something far deeper? There's a growing theory floating around the interwebs that the story isn't everything we believe it to be on the surface. There are hints of this throughout the story and beyond. Perlica dismissing the Inmen's concerns, repeated comments about expanding the factory and turning the planet into a giant factory to which we all belong, the blind obedience to the Inmen, the fact that no one but the amnesic main character seems to know the full scope of the plan. It's all a little too convenient. Then there's Nefereth's infamous tyrant comment, which is revisited during Lavatane's quest, and no matter what way you slice it, something doesn't add up. There's too many variables in play here. But there's something that stands out as the main complaint of a lot of players who are dissatisfied with the presented story. The constant and unstoppable glazing of the Administrator. Every character, those who knew him then and those who didn't at all, they pay the Inmen an immense amount of trust and reverence. There's no question to their motives, it's like this blind obedience. And players don't seem to really like that portion of the narrative. But what if it's all a part of the design? Just because Nefereth and the Lambreakers are bad, that doesn't necessarily mean that Endfield or the Endmen are actually good. First, an explanation. Ryan and I both play the original Arknights. In fact, he's one of the main ones who pulled me into the game. Arknights frequently explores dark and twisted story beats and has no qualms about doing so. If you don't know the main character of Arknights, the Doctor's true history, maybe you could take this story that's presented here at surface level and just consider it a quirk that every character is blindly, obsessively reliant and trusting of Inmen. But me personally, I think there's more underneath the surface. Ryan pointed something out to me that got me thinking. North Korea. Hold on, bear with me. The Supreme Leader, he's revered, worshipped even. He and former Supreme Leaders are taught in school, complete indoctrination. And I submit to you that this world of Talos 2 has some parallels in its attention to the Inmen. Inmen is literally this mythological character from educational books made manifest in the flesh. Multiple characters and voice lines allude to this fact, be it from Yvonne, Rossi, or the residents of Valley 4. Inmen, as a character, is the closest thing to a god these people actually know. They made technological marvels, protected humanity on multiple occasions, and their awakenings have seemingly coincided with times of severe crisis where they've then intervened. You can hear it in the Tall Tales Rossi questions the Inmen on. Inmen is a figure that's more akin to a god of protection to the people of Talos 2. And so far, they've visited places that hold them in a general high regard. But what happens when they don't? When Inman arrives in an area that doesn't have any affiliation with his old self, or hold the Inman in reverence, what happens when the supreme leader leaves North Korea? Still a leader, but the god becomes a normal person. When people don't have to glaze Inman, what happens? We already know from the Lavatane story, Inman is basically just winging it because of the insanely high expectations placed on them from the legends, suffering from massive imposter syndrome. So how would they take it if they suddenly went from worshipped, trusted, and beloved by all, to suddenly viewed in complete opposition? Further, what if it was an area antagonistic to the Inman? I submit to you, what if there's something more sinister at play here? What if we're actually playing We Happy Few? For those unfamiliar with that game, the main character has to take a drug called Joy to stay happy and conform, or otherwise be ostracized as an outsider. What if the places we've been so far have been under the influence of Joy, so to speak? The Inman and their legend is this drug, this potent, omnipotent presence that people have been taught in school is the greatest champion of Talos 2. But the truth? There seems to be something much more sinister at play here. Perlica can barely go a sentence without saying something completely suspect. What's coming in the next chapter of Wu Ling? Perlica casually mentioning manifest destiny as we expand outward, spreading our influence and turning the entire planet into a factory to which we all belong? Eliminating war by uniting all peoples under a common banner, the Enfield Industries banner? Perlica's devotion to Inman is easy to explain. One of the last actions that Inman took before collapsing the last time was to fully and completely cure Perlica of blight infection. But the kind of devotion that leads to Perlica straight telling Inman to ignore the Originium's negative side effects like Oreopathy that are spreading due to our actions, let me present you an alternative of our current situation. Inman's sarcophagus is an Originium crystal. Those of you who caught my Reconveners video, thanks for watching that by the way, are already familiar with the concept. But in a nutshell, Reconveners are clones of former operators who were infected with Oreopathy, which assimilated their genetic code into data which is then stored in the Originium forest. We convene with this forest through the Originium crystals we use in our summoning draws, and these crystals we use for Originium summoning, they look the same as the one the Inman resides in. What am I saying? What if our Inman is a Reconvener? What if the original Inman is actually still around? What if we're opposed to each other? Branching paths? The game in its present state would have you believe that Endfield is the arbiter of good and Nefereth's crew is the axis of evil. But something is clearly off. Nefereth's tyrant content, the way Aradashir looks at Inman, our memory loss, it's all way too convenient. It's breadcrumbs leading to something much, much bigger. You could call this video cope, and maybe it is, but I'm not alone in thinking that something's not what it seems here. Of course, I could be way off base, and the story really is just that simple. Only time will really tell, but what do you all think? Is Inman the villain, or am I just coping for a badly written plot? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section, and let's have a conversation about this. Also, if you want to keep up with me, feel free to join the Autumn's Army Discord or follow me on X. Subscribing on YouTube is the best way to keep up to date on all my videos, and if you're interested in reading my guides in text format, feel free to head on over to icyveins.com, where you can find all of the guides written by yours truly and a few of my friends, including Ryan himself, who also built out the Enfield spreadsheet, now available to the public in our Discord. Anyways, that's all for today. I will catch you all in the next video. Later.